Hi, fourth graders. I want to talk to you today about a really awesome, a fabulous modern artist named Andy Warhol. And what we're going to do is make a set of notes about Andy Warhol, but we're going to do the notes in a really special way called a sketch to stretch. So you'll want to get a piece of plain paper, fold it in half, and then in half again to start out. Go ahead and crease the fold. And you can open it up. And we're going to number each one of the squares. And we'll label the sketch to stretch with the artist's name, Andy Warhol. So I started a set of notes in advance so that I could work on them while I talk to you about Andy and get some detail. And then you can, Miss Warner will start and stop the video, or the video as we're going along. But anyway, the first thing that I wanted to tell you about in our first square is that Andy and his family came from Europe. And they actually came from part of Europe called Slovakia. And they moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, PA. So that's where his family really started out when they moved to America. And anyway, when Andy was born, the strangest thing happened. He was born in a hospital and he had a birth certificate, but they forgot to put the birth date down. So it went for a long, long time that nobody noticed and nobody wrote down what day. And his family was pretty poor, so they never celebrated birthdays, and so no one ever knew what his real birthday was. And later on, when he got older, he would just make up different birthdays and have unbirthday parties and kind of make fun of the fact that no one knew what day he was really born. But I'm sure you can imagine what that would be like. To not even know what your own birthday was. Anyway, he was part of a family with 4 kids, and let's just go ahead and draw that. Put the faces and draw the mom and dad and the 4 kids. These drawings don't have to be complicated at all. They can be really just simple faces that represent that in so many ways. It just helps you remember. The reason that I did some pre-drawing on these is just that it's hard to be talking, to be drawing, and filming all at the same time. So as I said, you can stop and catch up with the drawings. Anyway, so he had 3 siblings, and his dad was a construction worker. He never made very much money, but they were pretty much just a regular kind of middle class family. And his mom was a homemaker, but she was also an artist. And this became a really important fact in Andy's life. Anyway, his name when he was a kid, not only did he not have a birth date, but he also didn't really go by his real name. His birth name was Andy Warhola, but when he got older and became an artist, he decided to drop off the A. I'm not sure why. Anyway, so when Andy got a little bit older and he started school, unfortunately, he became really sick, and he had some kind of a liver sickness. And he had seizures. So I just drew the head. So you want to go ahead and put an oval on your page, and then put a bubble up above it to kind of get down what his thinking was at the time, or what he might say. Anyway, he didn't even get to go to school because he was so sick, and he had seizures pretty frequently, and so he had to stay home with his mom. And so when I'm going to draw Andy's face, and I'm going to draw pretty intense because he was definitely very unhappy at that time, as you can imagine. So So there's Andy. I'm going to put a hat on him. And there's maybe some hair coming out the sides. Andy Warhol, when he got older, was known for his really super crazy hair. But anyway, he was very sad because he didn't get to go to school with his siblings. And that was why it was a good thing that his mother had such an artistic talent, because she was able to stay home and teach him. And so she would say, I can homeschool you and teach you art. So, and this is really important, that it's art, not just drawing or painting, but she was an artist who helped Andy develop as a graphic artist, and in so many ways. So she played a very, very important role in his life. And we're going to give her a big head of big hair, big curly hair. Put some ears on her for sure. A few eyelashes. Anyway, the more detail you put onto your pictures, the more you're going to enjoy them in the end. So Andy was super sick. He had seizures. He couldn't go to school. He stayed home with his mom. She helped him become the artist that he later was. So he went back to school. He started feeling better from his seizures and stuff. And of all of his brothers and sisters, he was the only one that got to go to college. And so you can just draw a little house, draw a little building as you would with a square and a triangle above it. Put on the roof. And this is Andy got to go to college. He was the only one of his brothers and sisters who went to college, because his dad saw such enormous potential for him, because he was so talented on all the years he was home with his mom. Anyway, so he became a graphic designer. He studied graphic design, and he later went to New York City after he graduated from college. And when I'm just abbreviating New York City, and then I'm putting a heart next to New York City, because they loved Andy and Andy loved them. He had so many friends in New York City. In fact, there came a time where he built his own club called The Factory. And I've drawn just a little building, calling it The Factory. I drew a little cocktail glass on here, because that was kind of what the culture was at that time, where with Andy anyway, he was there partying up at the factory with his friends, and he was a famous designer, and he just, at that point, he had made so much money. Money was the main thing for Andy, and he really saw art as business. Different than many artists. In fact, his whole concept in art was different, because most of his art was based on culture, and many of you have seen the real popular image of a Campbell's soup can, just a soup can. That is one of his most famous images. But he's also famous for a style that probably lots of you have heard of, and it is called pop art. And lots of pop art pieces almost look like they were out of comic books. Lots of pop art pieces are, big, bold colors and really smashing designs. But most of Andy's work was repeated designs, bold, super bold colors, but repeated over and over and over designs. And many of you have probably seen his work, his portrait of Marilyn Monroe. And it was just kind of like this, where there were so many images of her face in all different colors. And that was kind of what his artwork was all about. And again, his work, his artistic work was compelled in most part by money. Money was his motivator. And he did, a lot of his work was done in prints that he could sell thousands of to the public. So that was very important in the work that Andy did. Later in his life, an event occurred that really changed everything. Andy and his friends were all at the factory partying up, drinking and dancing and doing all the things that they would always do. And he had taken a movie script from this woman, and he never gave it back to her. In fact, then he actually told her that he'd lost the script. So she was super offended, and she came to the factory and she shot Andy. And she shot actually a few of his friends also, but it was only Andy that was really badly hurt and had to go to the hospital. So her name was Valerie Solanas. And she really wounded Andy badly, as I said, and he wound up going to the hospital. And while he was in the hospital, he was so close to death that he developed a terrible fear of hospitals. And after that, he was just always convinced that if he ever wound up having to go to the hospital, I shouldn't make him smiling like that either. If he ever had to go to the hospital again, he was sure that it would kill him. So he was always very worried about having to go to the hospital. A couple of years after he was shot, he developed a terrible gallbladder problem. And it wound up, of course, that he had to go to the hospital. So anyway, he was always thinking, I almost died, and now I'm scared of hospitals. But sure enough, he wound up at the hospital for a simple gallbladder surgery. And anyway, it was a very common surgery, and as it is today. But Andy, of course, went in there, was very afraid of what would happen, and it wound up killing him. So he died 2 days later. But certainly in Andy's life, he made a lot of money. He got art out into the public because he sold lots of prints, and hundreds and thousands of his pieces went out to people of all income brackets. And he was very successful in his life. So that is pretty much the story of Andy Warhol.